morning, beloved. Welcome to Beacon. I'm Reverend Dr. Robin, she, her, a member of the leadership team here at Beacon, in this community committed to radical inclusion, to feeding the human spirit, and yes, to healing the world. We are so glad you are with us this day, however you are joining us, across miles, across screens, perhaps even as the snow falls where you are, as it just was here in New Jersey. My colleague, Reverend Emily, and I are gathered here in our 100-year-old sanctuary in Summit, New Jersey, gathered on Lenni Lenape Native American land. And what of you, beloved? What is your name, and where are you joining us from? We invite you to share it in the chat so that we can begin to weave together this gathered community of intentionality and to lift up gratitude for one another's presence. We gather at the conclusion of one holiday and just on the cusp of another one.
So whether you are joining us today from the home of a beloved friend or family member, en route from one location to another, or from the warmth of your own home, we welcome you to our annual Bread Communion service.
While we may not be gathered in person to bring forward the bread that is before us and share it with one another, we know that we each share a rich history of breaking bread with one another, memories of meals prepared and shared. And so I invite you just to take a second to recall such a moment.
Or you can even put us on pause. I know.
No, it was a really bad joke.
Take a moment to get up and get your favorite bread, whether it's leftover cornbread or wheat bread, maybe a little bit of matzah that you have in preparation for this evening. Grab your favorite butter, jam, spread, and enjoy a moment of solitude here with all of us.
So let us gather together this day, Beacon, to be nourished in body, in mind, and in spirit as we kindle the light of our chalice.
We light this, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, a flaming chalice, a symbol of sanctuary in dangerous times. We kindle its flame on this, the first night of Hanukkah, in remembrance of the miracle of the oil that burned for 8 days, creating hope when there was none. May its flame help us embody the hope of our ancestors.
Emily wanted Kathy and me to share. Emily wanted Kathy and me to share our Sabbath celebration with the congregation. I was raised Jewish.
And I was raised Unitarian. And I wanted to continue the Shabbat tradition that Andy grew up with, but I gulped when we got to the part of the prayer that says,
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe.
right, so I made up my own little ditty song for lighting the candles. Here we go.
We light the Friday candles, the weekly pace is ended. May these special lights help our souls be mended. Amen. So Kathy wrote something new for the candle lighting, but we retained the original Hebrew prayers for the other two things that we bless, which is first the wine and then the challah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri ha'ofen. Amen. Now, our dog Toby and Kemi, our dog Kemi, they seem to be familiar with the Hebrew. Whenever we start singing the Hebrew, they go barking like crazy because the next thing is the challah, and they seem to love the challah. Anyway, cheers, l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ha'otzi lechem min haaretz, Good boy. Okay, Kevin, here you go. Okay, good one. So that's it, right?
And then we share
And
some
then we share
ourselves.
some challah ourselves. And to you.
Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down where you want to be. And when you find yourself in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Beloved, I invite you to take a few breaths with me, or perhaps to allow your gaze to soften, to center in. Center in now with me, center into strength, center into story. The rich texture and weaving of your life with all of those who came before you. To know what it is to be grounded into sweet earth that sustains us. Center into resilience of a million stars echoing light across the universe. Leaves blanketing earth to protect seedlings. Of the thousands of ancestors who had to be in order that you might be in this moment. Center into the sound of your soul now, the chambers where there might be brilliance or hurt, longing and hope. Center into the connection where truly pain creates compassion, where hope crafts vision, and longing leans into community. Center into the story that is still being told. For this new page, this new chapter in your book, your story, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Terry Polachek, Beacon member. There is no doubt that life is full. Simply a conversation where someone asks how you are and really wants to know your answer reveals that fullness of life, which includes both joys and sorrows, both struggles and celebrations. Each week, we at Beacon endeavor to honor the fullness that is life. Perhaps with our hands on our hearts, we can offer up strength and good energy to cope with our difficulties and personal struggles. In the chat, we can also lift up the names of a person or a place that is struggling so that we can hold them together. We can also offer up gratitude for the everyday miracles, both big and small, that we encounter. Within our Beacon community, we lift up Eric Paul, who lost his mother, Pat Ostrander, and David and Chris Gordon, who welcomed a grandson, Teddy. We lift up all those who struggled so hard to bring justice for Ahmaud Arbery and to work to stem the tide of prejudice and hate. We lift up his family who suffered the loss of a child, a brother, a friend. We also lift up the victims of the tragedy in Waukesha, those who were killed, those who were injured, those who responded to help, and those who witnessed the senseless act of violence. May they find peace and healing. Tonight, our Jewish brothers and sisters will begin the 8-day celebration of Hanukkah, in part the celebration of a miracle. There was only enough oil for the temple to last one day. It lasted 8 days until the new supply arrived. A miracle. Today I celebrate miracles. I light a candle today for all those suffering loss, trauma, anxiety. I also light a candle in gratitude for all the good in my world. Feel free to say a name out loud or put in the chat someone or something you'd like remembered. Light a candle wherever you are, and remember always. With each candle lit, may each one of us know that we are held in the care and love of our community. Joy, beauty, and blessings are all around us. Lift up a celebration in your life. Birthdays, anniversaries, new beginnings, good endings, healing. We celebrate you. Today I celebrate all the children and grandchildren in my life. I celebrate the older ones on their ways to adulthood, the little ones with faces gleaming with hope. I celebrate their parents, guiding them to the best life possible. My miracles, my hope for a kind and peaceful future. And I celebrate the courageous members of our Beacon community and the greater community who strive to make this a safe and welcoming place for all of us, both young and old alike. For these gifts and so much more, we give thanks.
Hello, thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you today. Unfortunately, I don't come with the greatest of news. Need in our community continues to rise. We attribute this to the rising cost of living, the fact that benefits are becoming difficult, not only for people to obtain, but for people to keep. And also a portion of our population are simply making too much money to attain benefits, but not enough money to afford the necessities of life in our community. Last week, we broke a record. Now, usually that is a very good thing, and in this case, it was not exactly a good thing. The good news is we had enough to make sure that everyone who came to us in need received fresh food, received some shelf-stable food, and some household supplies. But we served more households last Thursday than we ever have in our history of grace. We served 537 households, whereas our record was 526 during the height of the shelter-in-place COVID period. So we are working on next steps. We are working to secure donations and funding. So in case we get another surge like that, we are prepared. And that really is where your support comes in. Your attention, your presence, your either through volunteering or through supporting Grace, and just from your attention and having to understand what's really going on in our community, all will protect our neighbors. We are so thankful for you, and we hope that you're doing well And if you aren't, we hope that you know that you can always come to Grace, and we can help you and we can help your neighbor. That's all because of your care. Thank you.
A few Saturdays ago, I finally baked my maternal grandmother's German chocolate cake. As a child, I remember this 3-layered light brown cake dripping with coconut pecan icing sitting on a grand glass cake stand. My grandmother was not fancy. She was the head nurse of a hospital operating room. Her lifelong motto was, "There's a lot of things worse than death, Emily." She was a humble woman, and this cake was her holiday masterpiece. I had never baked it before, and I wanted to bring more of her spirit into my life. I reached out to my aunt and asked for her recipe. She talked to her sister, who did a little digging, and then I received an email from my aunt that simply stated, "Grandma's recipe, it turns out, was not her own creation. It came from the back flap of the baker's chocolate bar." Okay, That's when the story, the myth of Doris Bryant Schalk's German chocolate cake took on new meaning. And it also allowed me to feel completely liberated to not like German chocolate cake, which it turns out I do not. Holidays like Thanksgiving, and as we move into Hanukkah and the larger holiday season, are annual rituals in the human endeavor of marking milestones, of storytelling and revisiting some of those stories. As the sun sets each Friday, Marshall and Sarah Duke gather their family and their friends for Shabbat dinner, just like Andy, Kathy, William, and their dogs in our story earlier in the service. While there are ancient rituals performed by Jews around the world, like lighting candles and blessing bread and wine, I've learned that each family adds their own to the mix. Marshall begins by pulling out a handful of traditional Jewish skull caps and Frisbee style, slinging them toward each of the grandchildren, who bob and weave in an attempt to land one on their heads. No one succeeds. "Is this ritual in the Torah, Grandpa?" "No," he says. "It's in the Duke Family Hall of Fame." That's when Marshall Duke marks the milestones that occurred that week. "Brandon, we're happy you're home from college. JD had his teeth pulled, so we celebrate his bravery. And we have 3 birthdays to mark this week. Shira, anything special for you?" "I got through finals," says the 12-year-old. "Great. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Let's eat." Too often, we do not have weekly or annual rituals like this to mark milestones, to mark our day-to-day lives, especially when we are living socially isolated from one another. Both the everyday milestones, but also the larger ones that happen upon us. On Monday, my brother texted me a particular milestone. On the day that he hugged his mother for the first time in 2 years, November 22nd, he also hugged his father for the last time 3 years ago. His phone happened to tell him that. Had he not texted me, would that milestone have gone unnamed? It made me wonder, what story will he tell his children about November 22nd? Will that day in his life become a day in which he hugs his children and tells them to do the same? It makes me wonder, what milestone did you mark this week? Who did you tell? And what story was it attached to? In 1992, the board game Life Stories went vintage. The game was designed to reveal the stories that we never tell in the regular chit-chat. Tell a story about a significant day in your life, it will ask. Tell a story about the first person who you loved unconditionally. Tell a story about stepping outside your comfort zone. In the mid-1990s, Marshall Duke, a psychologist, explored myth and ritual in American families. Soon after, his wife, Sarah, another psychologist working with children with disabilities, observed that the students who knew the stories of their families, both genetic and chosen, tended to do better when they faced challenges. Moreover, the more children knew about their family and their community stories, the stronger their sense of control over their own lives, the higher their self-esteem, the more successfully they believed their communities, their families functioned. That's why they created this Friday night ritual that was a part of an ancient tradition of noting milestones, of telling stories. I have to say that when my parents left their home state, moving far away, partly for work and partly to put distance between themselves and an abusive family system, our family stories opened up in new ways. We couldn't go home for Friday night dinners or even holidays, so we created family out of neighbors and friends. As a child, I was now part of a much larger network of families and their stories. And that's significant because the health and happiness, the resilience that is created in knowing our stories comes from a sense of being a part of something larger than oneself. Marshall Duke calls it our intergenerational self. We are all part of a larger story. If someone asks you, who are you? What stories would you tell about your intergenerational self? Stories that define your family of origin, stories about the communities in which you were raised, stories that you'll never know because they're out of your reach or wrapped in shame or embedded in systems of genocide and abuse, stories that shaped your values and beliefs and guide your actions to this day. What stories would you tell about who you are? These stories weave together to make a self, and they shape us. Unfortunately, too often only the good stories get oxygen. They are known as ascending stories or narratives. Onward and upward forever, only show your good side. In rejection of the ascending narrative, we've heard a lot of leaders shift toward only telling descending narratives or the Eeyore stories. Humanity is evil. There is no hope. There is only despair. The most healthful story, however, is not ascending or descending. It is the oscillating story. It is sharing with one another the stories of both our ups and our downs. Children who hear these oscillating stories on a regular basis become shaped by a resilient narrative. They understand that their communities, their families may have achieved a lot, but it hasn't been without setbacks. They hear it when their parents say, your grandfather died and your grandmother couldn't make enough money alone. The children had to help, but no matter what happened, we always showed up for one another. In her new book, Fierce Love, Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis tells a story from her childhood. It was a particular milestone grounded in a larger story that came to define her life. It was 1964, and Jackie was in kindergarten on Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She loved her kindergarten teacher and was inseparable from her friends, the two Tommies. Her kindergarten experience was only an ascending story. And then, a girl named Lisa moved to their base from Mississippi. Lisa squeezed between Jackie and her friends and whispered a racial slur at little Jackie. It was the first time she had heard the N-word. These two kindergartners were now caught up in a larger story of our country. At that age, Reverend Dr. Lewis writes now as a grandmother and as a fierce love minister, I vaguely understood that there were tensions in the American South, but those stories were from far away. And now Lisa had brought Mississippi with her to my happy little classroom. Jackie's parents knew the day was coming when they would have to add layers of stories to little Jackie's own story, a story that was right now based in being a little girl named for an elegant and brilliant wife of a presidential candidate, a story that was about a young, gifted black girl. And when Lisa entered Jackie's classroom, the day had arrived for her parents to open the story. Along with dinner, Reverend Dr. Lewis writes, Mom nourished me that evening with a way to think about and deal with bigotry. By dismissing Lisa's taunt as silly, she took the sting out of it and made me feel actually a little sorry for Lisa's ignorance. My father's response taught me that though Lisa's language and beliefs may have been silly, they were not without consequence. The next morning, Dad went to the Air Force Base commander and reported the incident, and he demanded that Lisa be made to apologize to me and that her father apologize to him. The commander agreed. Her parents didn't give her a history lesson in Jim Crow. They helped her make a meaning of the incident and showed her how to handle it. She said, they used this moment to story for me. You are loved, and you can handle racism with courageous truth-telling and moral courage. Stories like Reverend Dr. Lewis's don't just shape us once. They evolve as we evolve. That's why stories must be told and retold. That's why we have holidays and holy days and weekly rituals, so that like a spiral, we can revisit the stories from different places in our lives. Like my grandmother's German chocolate cake revisiting unearths new truths and gives rise to the possibility of transformation and liberation. And this, beloved, is what we do at Beacon as a faith community. Rituals that mark milestones, that's what we do. Storytelling and meaning making and liberation, these are the essential functions for a community of faith. And so this week, I want you to really think about ways that you can create a weekly ritual for storytelling in your life. Maybe it is coming here on Sunday and marking a milestone through the candle lighting. Maybe it is on holy days coming here and being a part of the storytelling. Maybe it is your community group. But if you don't have this, I invite you to do this little practice alone or gather a small group in person or virtually. One evening a week, gather a journal or a group of beloveds. And as the sun sets that day, light a candle. Name a particular milestone of the week. Write or tell the story of this milestone. And then ask yourself, what larger story in my life does this milestone touch? And how is it shaping me? Beloved, this is what it means to be human. To tell our stories and to understand it within the larger story. So may our rituals tell our stories, all of our stories, and may they weave into a wonderful fabric about what it means to be human. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Go lifted up.
This our ancestors sing to us.
Love, bless your way.
They sing to us in stories, blessing our way.
Moonlight, starlight.
Stories which kindle light into the darkest corners of our lives.
Guide your journey into peace.
A journey that promises healing and hope.
And the brightness of day.
For this, beloved, is the day, the life, the story that we are given.
Let us rejoice
And be glad in it.
Amen.
Ashe.